What is going on, Bro US history students, and welcome to another Bro History Regents review video. This video will cover the topics of the Articles of Confederation and constitutional compromises. So this video is going to give you everything that you need to know in order to be successful on your Regents exam come June. Let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so what was the Articles of Confederation, right? The American colonists, they had just won the Revolutionary War. They are finally officially free from the control of the British Crown. All right, so they need to make a government. All right, so the Articles of Confederation is the first government of the newly independent United States. All right, so it was ratified by all 13 states in 1781. So to ratify something means to accept. So they accept this new government. This new government maintained American independence. And basically, this government, it was a representation of American fear of a strong central government, right? So when we talk about the Articles of Confederation, it was initially designed to be very, very weak because, right, the American colonists, they had been just controlled by a king for many, many years, so they want to get away from being controlled by a king. So we're going to see, when we see the word Articles of Confederation, we automatically associate it with weaknesses. So we're going to dive into what exactly those weaknesses are in the Articles. All right, so weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Here is a list of ways in which the government was very, very weak. One of the things, right? Look at that first bullet point there. Could not directly tax its citizens. This was one of the major causes of the American Revolution, right? Because the British were taxing those colonists. So we're going to see the government is very reluctant to, because they are fearful that, hey, the citizens may try and overthrow the government just like they did prior in the Revolutionary War. The second bullet point, there is no national currency. All right, so when we think of a dollar bill today, right, a dollar bill is a dollar bill in every state. Back during the Articles of Confederation, post-Revolutionary War era, every state had their own form of currency. So how were you supposed to trade, right? A dollar in New York could be a different worth in Maryland or South Carolina. All right, so this is a major problem in terms of trading between states. There was no executive or president to make decisions in time of crisis, right? This would make sense. They didn't want to put too much power in one person's hands, right? They had just experienced that with the king, so they didn't want to give one person too much power. There was no national army. That's going to be a major weakness, right? You're going to need an army to defend foreign invaders, foreign countries. All right, so not having that's going to make us very, very weak. There's no national judiciary, so there's no court system in place to kind of resolve disputes between states. And I want you to star and highlight this in your notes, ladies and gentlemen. That last bullet point there. The Articles of Confederation gave way too much power to the states. So what I want you guys to think about, right? Remember in class how I made you do that Articles of Confederation monster assignment, right? You had to draw a monster that had 13 arms or whatever. Those 13 arms represented the 13 states, and they're kind of all flailing around, kind of doing their own thing, right? They had their own currency, etc., right? So they're not really unified. And I told you, in your monster, it cannot have a head because guess what? There was no head of the government. There was no person in control. All right, so again, think of the Articles of Confederation like that monster drawing assignment that you did in class, right? It gave way too much power to the states, not enough to the national government. All right, we're going to see that's going to really hurt the country down the road. All right, so we're going to need to come up with a new form of government, right? And so the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation were really highlighted, especially in the event known as Shays' Rebellion. All right, so Shays' Rebellion, this is a rebellion of angry farmers in Massachusetts. They're upset at being taxed by the national government. So what do? They basically go to the court system in Massachusetts and they riot and they rebel against the government. Well, wait a minute. We looked at one of the weaknesses, and there is no national army. So there was nothing that the country could do to shut down this rebellion. All right, so this is a major issue. So Shays' Rebellion kind of highlights the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. It basically said that the government could not properly respond in times of crisis. All right, so with Shays' Rebellion, it's going to be kind of the turning point in which we are going to need to create a new government. All right, so what's going to be next? So there's an event, the Constitutional Convention is going to meet in Philadelphia in 1787. So I put the picture of one of my favorite pictures in American history there. That is the Constitutional Convention. That is in Independence Hall, if you've ever been there. It's an amazing place to go. Basically, the goal of this convention, right, is to amend or to change the Articles of Confederation. They realized that the Articles of Confederation, they were just too weak. Right, so we need to make some minor tweaks to it. All right, and the man standing up at the front of that convention, that is George Washington, and he is elected president of the convention, right? He had led the army in the Revolutionary War, very well respected, probably the most famous American at that time in history. And arguably one of the most famous Americans still to this day. All right, so he was the perfect candidate for the Constitutional Convention. All right, we're going to talk about there were many people not represented at the Constitutional Convention, right? Women weren't allowed at this convention. African Americans were not allowed at this convention. All right, basically the only people that were invited were rich, wealthy, white owners. All right, so in the Constitutional Convention, we are going to come up with a lot of compromises. We talked about what is a compromise. So a compromise is an agreement, all right? So you need to make both sides happy because there's going to be some disagreements, and a compromise is kind of making both sides happy. So one of the major debates during this Constitutional Convention is the debate over representation in government, all right? So the first plan we're going to look at is the Virginia Plan. All right, so this is proposed by the state of Virginia, and basically what they suggest is representation should be based on population, right? So the bigger the state you are, the more representatives you should have in government, according to the state of Virginia. All right, so this is obviously supported by larger states, right? Those that have a larger population. All right, but then you're going to have states like New Jersey who are going to argue, wait a minute, that kind of is a disadvantage to us just because we are a smaller state, all right? That means we're going to kind of be left out of government, all right? And they propose that representation should be a set number, right? Everybody should have the same number of representation, all right? So this is obviously supported by the smaller states. All right, so we set a compromise. We need to meet in the middle, make an agreement between the two. So we're going to see the Great Compromise emerge during the Constitutional Convention. And basically what that did was it created what we call a bicameral legislature. So that basically creates two houses of Congress, right? When you ride a bicycle, it's a vehicle with two wheels. You look at binoculars, right? There's two slots for your eyes. So bi means two. So again, we're creating a two-house legislature. All right, so the one house is the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives would be based on population. So this makes those larger states very, very happy. And then the other house, which is created, is the Senate. There are two per state. This makes the smaller states happy. So again, the compromise made both sides very, very happy in terms of representation. All right, so some more compromises that were agreed upon during this Constitutional Convention, right? The 3/5 compromise, right? So southern states or southern owners are going to want the enslaved population to count towards congressional representation, right? So these southern plantation owners are like, hey, we have all these slaves. I think they should probably count towards our representation in Congress. That way we have more of a say within our government. Right? Obviously, the people in the North, they are extremely fearful of that, right? Many of the northern states have either just started to abolish slavery or have already abolished slavery during this time. All right, so they're fearful that this 3/5 compromise would give the South way too much power or an advantage within Congress. So they come up with a compromise, right? So basically, 3 out of every 5 slaves would count towards the population in the House of Representation. In the House of Representatives. So again, makes the North happy because slaves don't count as much towards the population, makes the South happy because those slaves do count towards the population in the House of Representatives. All right. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the slave trade compromise, right? So slavery is going to remain legal under this new proposed constitution, but the import of slaves, which means bringing the slaves over from Africa, would end after 20 years after the Constitution was ratified or signed or agreed. All right. So that's the slave trade compromise. So basically no more slavery after this Constitution is signed and put into place in our new government. Also to emerge during this time is the Electoral College. All right. Very controversial part of our government today. Basically, the Electoral College is a system to elect the President of the United States. All right, so this is put into place because at the time the Constitution was being proposed, there were many people that did not trust your everyday farmers to vote for the president, right? If you were not educated, They said you were not worthy of choosing a president. So again, this electoral college is put into place because they do not trust the common man to vote. Right? So in order to vote, you had to own three things: land, you had to be educated, and you had to be white. Right? African Americans or slaves could not vote during this time. Women could not vote during this time. All right? So the electoral college system, very controversial. We had a great conversation about this in class, right? So there are some flaws with the electoral college, right? Because we've seen in elections such as the last one we talked about in 2016 with Donald Trump, right? Someone can win the popular vote. So Hillary Clinton had won the popular vote in the election of 2016, but she lost the presidency. So we've seen that also in our history. In turn, the last one being 2000 as well, with Al Gore and George Bush. All right, another flaw with the electoral college system: does my vote really count? All right, so this was a very heated debate in class with some of you guys. Unfortunately, your vote truly doesn't count, right? You vote for the people in the House of Representatives and the Senate who vote for you, but your single vote will not be the determining factor on who gets elected president. So kind of a controversial thing. There have been discussions. There are pros and cons with the electoral college system. And again, you need 270 votes in today's presidency to become the president of the United States. All right, so here's some Regents questions from past exams that are on the Articles of Confederation and constitutional compromises. So if we look at that first question together there, at the Constitutional Convention of 1787, the Great Compromise settled the issue of representation in Congress by choice A, right? Giving each state 2 senators and number of representatives based on population. So whenever you see the Great Compromise, you'll always look for the answer with either bicameral legislature or equal representatives in the Senate, something along those lines. So just know that the Great Compromise created that bicameral legislature. The second question, again, at the Constitutional Convention, the Great Compromise resolved the controversial issue of representation in Congress, right? That was kind of the big debate that was taking place in Philadelphia in 1787. All right, and then that third question, the most significant change from the Articles of Confederation to the U.S. Constitution was the strengthening power of the federal government, right? Under the Articles of Confederation, there were many weaknesses. We saw no power to tax, no national currency, no national army. All those problems are going to be fixed under the U.S. Constitution. So again, these are just a few of the Regents questions you could possibly see. Again, we will continue to look at more and more of these Regents questions as we get closer to your exam come June. All right, so let's do a quick recap. We have to know that the Articles of Confederation were weak. Star that, highlight that, circle that, underline that, please. We have to know that they are weak. They were designed intentionally weak, all right, because they had just gotten out of control of a king. Shays' Rebellion, know the significance of it, right? So this is kind of the event that led to people questioning the Articles of Confederation. We're going to make a change under the Constitution. You got to know the Virginia and New Jersey plans and how they led to the Great Compromise, all right? Know the 3/5 compromise, so this means 3 out of every 5 slaves would count towards the population. And finally, the slave trade compromise. So again, importation of slaves will end 20 years after the ratification of the Constitution. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for tuning in and watching this Breau History Regents Review video on the Constitutional Convention and the Articles of Confederation. I want to wish you all good luck on your Regents exam come June. I have tremendous faith in you all. If you have any other questions, please reach out to me or follow me at Breau History on Twitter, and I will sure to help you as best I can. All right, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Bye-bye.